What is shaking, Internet? This is Saltz bringing you the How to Tank for Dummies guide, Feng the Accursed LFR. Feng is the second boss in the first section of Mogu'Shan Vaults, which in LFR is called the Guardians of the Vault. The trash leading up to Feng is pretty straightforward. You do want to take the trash facing away from the raid, see tanking 101, but otherwise not much to say about these guys. Feng himself, on the other hand, has 3 phases and some bonus abilities we need to discuss briefly. First, let's talk about bonus tank abilities. Shortly after starting the fight, two big floating blue crystals will spawn near the front of the platform, where you enter from. Facing Feng from the entryway, the right one is Nullification Barrier, and the left one is Shroud of Reversal. Tanks can click on these crystals to gain the ability as an action button, and only tanks can click on them. Shroud of Reversal is a meh spell that you can use on allies that are targeted by Feng's abilities to throw back at the boss. It's basically a minor DPS increase, but can be used in a few important ways, which we'll discuss. Nullification Barrier, however, is a very important ability that will be used throughout the fight. It creates a bubble around the user, nullifying all damage to all raid members in the big purple bowl, and stopping buffs on the boss within the bubble. This will come in handy for the super moves the boss uses throughout the fight. Note that this is a channeled ability, meaning you have to stand still and not press any buttons or move while casting it, or you'll break it early. First up, throughout the entire fight, Feng will periodically cast a stacking DOT on his target, hopefully the tanks. This thing hits pretty hard, so I'd recommend tank swapping at about 2 stacks, maybe 3. So when the other tank has 2 or 3 stacks, taunt off of him, and vice versa. Deadly Boss Mods announces these stacks, and I would highly recommend that you have that add-on installed, but if not, you can look at the tanks in the raid frames on the side of the screen and see the DOT and number of stacks. The names of the dot change from phase to phase, but the basic concept doesn't. Taunt at 2 stacks. There you go. Now for each phase. Phase 1 starts a few seconds into the fight, where Feng goes to the backmost statue. He gains 2 abilities here, Fists of Lightning and Epicenter. Fists of Lightning has a short cast, then Feng sends out a lightning shockwave in front of him that does damage and stuns everyone it hits. Simply move to the side when he begins casting this to avoid getting stunned. Epicenter is his first super move. It does raid-wide damage and does more damage to people the closer they are to Feng. That being said, the best strategy is actually to stack directly on top of Feng. Why? Well, because the tank can pop Nullification Barrier and completely remove all damage for almost the entire duration of Epicenter. Nullification Barrier should be up for every single Epicenter as well, at least in LFR. So this should be the basic strategy. Just stack on the boss and pop the bubble. If ranged is really far out for some reason, they should just run further out to avoid damage. Note that during the cast of Epicenter, 75% of all attacks made on Feng will miss, so avoid using any DPS cooldowns here. So, quick recap of Phase 1. Avoid the stunning shockwaves, and bubble and stack on boss during Epicenter. There you go. On to Phase 2. At 2/3 health, Feng will run to the next statue and get a spear. He loses his previous 2 abilities, meaning he loses Fists of Lightning and Epicenter, and he gains 2 new ones, Wildfire and Draw Flames. Wildfire randomly assigns fire patches to raid members. Tanks should never get this, but those raid members will drop fire on the ground after a few seconds, so don't stand in the fire and try to keep the boss away from the fire if at all possible. If there's too much fire in your area, obviously just pull the boss over to a cleaner spot. Draw Flames is his new super move that replaced Epicenter. Feng will suck up the flames spread out, literally dragging them to him slowly and absorbing them, making his next attacks do a big chunk of fire damage to the entire raid. Again, Nullification Barrier time. You'll want to pop the bubble on top of the boss when he begins casting Draw Flame. The reason for this is that when the boss is in the bubble, he can't absorb the flames, and when they get to him, they just disappear and don't give him stacks. So, very simple phase, don't stand in the fire, and pop the bubble during Draw Flames. Last up is Phase 3. At 1/3 health, Feng will run to the last statue and get a staff. He again loses his previous abilities and gains 2 new ones, Arcane Resonance and Arcane Velocity. Resonance gets put on random people in the raid and does damage to them and people close to them, so AoE damage. The more people that are close to the resonating character, the more damage. So if people are all stacked up, it can actually blow up the raid within seconds, very easily. As a tank, you shouldn't ever get this debuff, but be aware of the purple circles around the ground, around affected raid members, and try to stay out of them. If people are stacked and not running out of the raid group, then take the boss away from them somewhere else. The other move is Arcane Velocity, Feng's last super move. This again does raid damage and does more damage the further away you are from the boss. So the strategy is actually the exact same as Epicenter. Everyone should just stack on the boss and the tank should pop the bubble. However, the tank should wait probably a few seconds into Arcane Velocity to pop the barrier, because right after Arcane Velocity is finished, Feng could put Resonance on raid members. And since they'll be stacked up for the Arcane Velocity, it could very easily blow up the raid very quickly. The barrier tank should wait about 2 seconds after the velocity has started to use the barrier for this reason, because it will prevent the damage from resonances right after the velocity, and give the raid members a few seconds to move and spread out again. Briefly, I wanted to cover Shroud of Reversal. It's really not needed at all in the fight, at least in LFRs, but we'll go ahead and cover it. What you want to do with it is you cast it on an ally and you channel. The next move that targets them will be transferred to you, allowing you to recast it on the boss. You can do this for most of the abilities the boss uses, but the most important one being Fists of Lightning. During the first phase, if you can, copy a Fists of Lightning, you can actually stun the boss when he casts Epicenter. Still though, Nullification Barrier should be up for every single super move in LFR, so there's not much point in using this Shroud effectively. Overall, this boss is pretty straightforward, so let's go ahead and review. Okay, throughout the fight, taunt at 2 stacks of the DOT. During Phase 1, avoid the stuns and stack on the boss with Barrier for Epicenter. Phase 2, avoid fire and use Barrier for Draw Flames. Phase 3, stay away from purple circles and stack on the boss with Barrier for Velocity. Quick note for the overachievers while I'm still working on normal guides. The main difference between LFR and normal is that Nullification Barrier has about twice the cooldown, meaning it can only be used for every other super move. This will lead to quite a different strategy, meaning that you actually will have to take some of them to the face, and you actually have to use Shroud of Reversal effectively to stun him in Phase 1, so it'll actually be beneficial. Otherwise, everything just hurts a lot more. I hope you enjoyed this guide for dummies. Please like, favorite, subscribe, all that jazz, and as always, you keep it salty, Internet.